Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another Boruto 2 Blue Vortex discussion. Today, I wanted to do something dangerous and I want to bring up the inevitable invasion of the Shinjuu into Konoha, and I want to weigh in on what this is actually going to be something that makes a bigger deal than we might have actually been thinking. But I also wanted to bring to your attention how this might end up being the biggest fumble in the Naruto franchise if this very situation is not handled very carefully in the story of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, because this can go very wrong. Now allow me to explain what I mean with that last point first, because you're probably going, how can this end up being a fumble when all the seeds are there for this to be something hype? After all, this is a battle shonen. Who doesn't love to see big power levels colliding and explosions and over-the-top battles and good strategies? I'm guilty of it too. Not just with battle shonen. You guys know I love pro wrestling, so to borrow a phrase of Big E, I love seeing big meaty men slapping meat. It never fails to be something super amazing to see. Pause. But you get the point of what I'm saying. I'm a sucker for good action as well. However, where I worry about the prospect of a battle breaking out inside of Konoha with the Shinjuu invading is I worry that it might happen too soon. I do like the idea of a small group of Shinjuu who they are evolved as we were told, and them saying that they're going to target Boruto specifically, as well as Kawaki and Naruto and Sarada and Konohamaru, but I don't think having them bum rush their way into the village is the right chess move to make right now at this point in the story. I think you run the risk of diminishing returns if you pull the trigger on this too soon. Like say if Boruto versus Mitsuki ends up lasting say a couple of chapters and then the Shinjuu end up breaking up the fight and forcing a truce between these two because the enemy and my enemy is my friend. I think that's the wrong play, because we literally just had Code invade the Land of Fire and the Hidden Leaf Village with this Claw Grime army. If you have the evolved Shinju pull back up this soon, even though in real time for us it's been months, from a narrative perspective, that comes off lazy and it comes off as rush writing. It's a big part of the reason why I told you guys I did not want to see Boruto versus Kawaki really early on in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, because towards the end of Boruto Part 1, we just saw them fight over and over and over again. Diminishing returns doesn't hold the same value. If you have the evolved Shinju pull back up, I think the story can benefit from a delayed payoff when it comes to that situation. On one hand, I do enjoy keeping the foot on the gas in the way that it's been since we got out of the time skip. The idea that Boruto hasn't been able to breathe without a foot being placed on his neck and then Boruto having to beat some manners into someone is something I can definitely enjoy. However, in this one area, I do think you can keep your foot on the gas but not have the Shinju be used to engage in a battle where Konoha ends up being the lightning rod that is used to draw the battle to the attention of the readers. Invading Konoha, it's been done a few times already, and each time it was to a different degree in terms of statements that are made narratively, and when it comes to that trope, it's already peaked in my opinion. Orochimaru did it in part 1 and made you realize how dark and twisted the ninja world was, where someone like Orochimaru can pull off something crazy like this against the strongest ninja village, but also kill 2 Kage in the process. And years later, by the time we got to the 5 Kage summit, we see Orochimaru's actions at that point in the timeline still had sent shockwaves with some of the other Kage. Pain pulls up into the village and didn't just invade the village itself, he destroyed the village. And then we learn in Naruto Parent and Child Ace novel that the damage he did literally cracked parts of the village down to the foundation. But most importantly, that was a moment that when Naruto saw his village had been destroyed, it set the stage for Naruto being pushed into despair and cracking, then being changed down to a fundamental level, needing to build him back up to the point that we got him to where we know and love him today. Code invading Konoha with those claw grimes, it was never going to be able to pass that moment in the Pain arc. It was not going to be able to match that aura that Pain had. But the narrative was smart enough to not try and match that moment, not even try to rival that moment, because we know the village is going to be destroyed later on by the time of Boruto versus Kawaki takes place. We just don't know how we're going to get to that point. The idea of using Code taking time to build up his army and then invade the village in the opening chapter, it wasn't a bad thing. It was actually smart. It basically served as a great way to have us hook into this new sequel, Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, by paying off the question we had going into the time skip at the end of Boruto Naruto Next Generations, which is why hadn't Code made his move yet? And it served as a lightning rod to force Boruto out of hiding, and then it served as a launching pad for this Shinju awakening arc that we're in currently, where you have the evolved Shinju in the process all this time. Now that you have that, you don't waste it by just going right into it. These Shinju, they have their own personalities and they have their own targets. It's better to give us a chance to see more of their personalities and their mannerisms before you get to that point. The same is true for their targets as well. You have Konoha as the target of one of the Shinju, taking a few pages to show Konoha and Team 10 getting a little more seasoning added to what we already saw with them vowing to want to make whoever turned Moegi into a tree. It can do wonders to the story. The same especially with Sarada. I stand by what I said a few days ago, that we don't need her seen crying and reacting angrily at what happened with Sasuke, but I do think you have low-hanging fruit right here that adds layers to this by taking a few pages in a future chapter of showing her telling Sakura the truth, especially when you consider the last time we saw Sakura in the manga was way back in the car arc, where she found Sasuke leaking out fluids out of his body because Jigen did him dirty like a discount OnlyFans model, and then she was shown sitting at Sarada's bedside after Boro almost killed all the members of Team 7. Sakura learning what happened to her husband, it adds another layer of humanity to the story without taking away from what we're clearly building towards and without taking away from the new generation's development. I worry about rushing to the conclusion we have here with this, when there feels like there's more that can be done with these Shinju to make the battles feel like they're holding more weight to them moving forward. I don't subscribe to this whole line of thinking that we need villains with sobbing backstories and deep philosophical reasons for why it is that they do the things that they do. There's nothing wrong with a good villain who's just evil for the sake of being evil. There's nothing wrong with that. Some of the most iconic shonen villains, they're just evil a-holes for no reason at all. But Kishimoto, with these Shinju, he's knocking on the door of something that could turn out to be really fantastic writing. The answer to the question of what it means to be human, that's something that at its heart, every great story answers this question in its own individual way through character interactions and narrative themes, and in battle shonen, through the individual fights, you see members of the main cast actually undergo. That answers the question as well. However, what's been noticeable with Kishimoto and his writing after Naruto chapter 700 is that he's been diving into that answer to that question in a different approach than he did with Naruto's manga. For instance, Naruto Gaiden, it dealt with the question of the morality of cloning and if clones were indeed to be considered human. With Naruto Gaiden, as a reminder, being Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage in the Scarlet Spring, i.e. the Shin Uchiha arc in Boruto's anime. I believe that's going to be episodes 18 through 25 of Boruto's anime. The Mitsuki one-shot manga, it dived even further onto the subject of cloning and clones having their own souls via the Orochimaru and his clone sons Mitsuki and Log angle. Boruto Naruto Next Generations dived into it again in manga format by having a motto with his daughter Akabi and her clone Delta, as well as Kashi and Koji being the clone of Jiraiya. Samurai 8, to a similar extent, also answered the question regarding humanity, even though it didn't do the whole science clone mumbo jumbo stuff that you see in Boruto's story. It did still answer that question on a deeper side of what it means to be human as well, in particular when it comes to Hachimaru's story. These Shinju are experiencing it themselves, questioning why they have the urges to seek out people close to the ones whose chakra that they were made from. Chakra is confirmed to contain memories, transfer memories, and genetic material actually contains memories as well, based off what we've seen with Kashi and Koji and with Delta, two clones of Jiraiya and Akabi respectively. There's room to build on this further. I think we need to spend some more time with these Shinju before we go into some version of a grand battle with the Shinju where you see total destruction left behind in their wake. It's all about payoff and setting the stage properly, but that's not to say you don't have something occur in the meantime. I think you absolutely do, especially because Juro specifically singled out Boruto by saying that he can run all he wants, but he can't escape from his destiny, which is to be consumed by us. And Boruto, you got lucky because we just evolved, sounding every bit like a Scooby-Doo villain. Just gonna say it for what it is. That's some Scooby-Doo writing right there. However, I do think it might be better to possibly have Boruto be targeted first, since Juro views him as being a lone wolf without any type of backup at first, before you have the other Shinjuu who are targeting Konoha Shinobi that they're going after. I think you start with Boruto, then you start fleshing the story out from there. Perhaps you roll the threat of the Shinjuu in as a precursor to Boruto versus Kawaki occurring in the village being in ruins before Boruto versus Kawaki takes place. That's certainly an option. It's not one that I think makes the most sense narratively. I think it's actually rushed if you do that. But if you wanted to jump to the front of the line to get to that outcome, it certainly is well within the realm of possibility to consider. This has the potential to have some really explosive battles, and the idea of the Shinjuu not just targeting Boruto Kawaki does give the other members of the main cast an opportunity to do something other than sit in the background, twiddling their thumbs, doing absolutely nothing, and hoping that in a few years when the anime gets this material, they might actually have some relevance. Like, I know Naruto's manga was bad about that after volume 27, where outside of Team 10, the rest of the other members of the main cast, they just kind of sat in the background until we got to the war. So I'm kind of used to it. However, I do think that this is something that can actually elevate the other members who are being targeted. This is not done by mistake. Having these fights where there's a clear narrative weight behind them and build up, it makes the fights hold more weight to them because it's gonna be something that has more stakes to it. Without going into spoilers, it will be like the current fight we have in Jujutsu Kaisen that's occurring. The fight in the last chapter, as well as the one that's coming up next week, was something that was years in the making, with layers being added as we got to it before we got onto the crazy stuff that's occurring now. Which, if you're curious about the current state of Jujutsu Kaisen's manga, click here to watch the latest chapter review from my KRYPTONIAN SAIYAN channel, and don't forget to subscribe to that channel as well, because we're so close to 100,000 subscribers on that channel too.